Welcome to the VandySports podcast on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick. This week's Vanderbilt football pregame show is brought to you by The Wash House, the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, Sutherland and Belk, John Levin and his company, Wobble Bond Dickinson, and Yeaman Packaging Systems. Topics on today's show are brought to you by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. That partnership began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee, and they now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. Today, they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more info, visit their website at mpmci.com. All right, we're previewing Vanderbilt and Texas. It's a top 25 matchup Saturday afternoon in Music City. The Longhorns and the Commodores going at it. We'll preview that matchup in its entirety. We'll also hear from head coach Clark Lee. The tight end position has been a struggle for this Commodore defense to stop. We'll hear from him and his thoughts on how they plan to attack defending Longhorn tight end Gunnar Helm. Speaking of Gunnar, Vanderbilt left tackle Gunnar Hansen will join us. I sat down with him yesterday to preview this matchup with Texas and also recap a little bit of the Ball State matchup. So I think you guys will enjoy the conversation there with Gunnar Hansen. Also, storylines to watch with Joey Dwyer, as we always do, and a special new guest this week, former Vanderbilt quarterback, head coach, offensive coordinator. Everybody loves these interviews with Coach Watson Brown. He'll join me to dive into the matchup against Texas. Speaking of the Longhorns, to close this pregame show out, I'll check in with Joe Cook from InsideTexas.com to get the scoop on the Longhorns on their way down here to Nashville. All right, this week's matchup preview is brought to you by The Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals at The Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. As I mentioned, it's a top 25 matchup. Vanderbilt sitting at 5-2 on the season, 2-1 in the SEC, ranked number 25 in the country, welcomes the 5th-ranked Texas Longhorns, sitting at 6-1 on the season, 2-1 in the SEC. The Longhorns, led by Steve Sarkisian, walk into Nashville as 18.5-point favorites. This game kicks off 3:15 p.m. Central Time here in Nashville at First Bank Stadium. You can watch it on the SEC Network. Tom Hart, Cole Kubelik, and Alyssa Lang will be on the call. The Commodores are hosting a top 5 opponent for the second time this season, obviously with the Alabama upset there. Number 1 Crimson Tide came in here and lost to the Commodores. As I mentioned, coming in at number 25 in the AP poll, Clark Lee's club is ranked for the first time since the end of the 2013 season, when James Franklin was here, and it's the first time Vanderbilt's been ranked in the top 25 in the middle of a season since 2008. That was Bobby Johnson. So we've seen a lot of different head coaches, a lot of different players ever since Vanderbilt was ranked in season. So pretty special season so far for the Doors. The Commodores and the Longhorns are meeting for the first time since 1928. Vandy leads the all-time series 8-3-1. So how about that? Commodores have not played the Longhorns since 1928, but they are 4-0 when they play the Longhorns at home. Last time out, the Commodores pulled away in the second half to beat Ball State last week, 24-14. The Doors are 4-0 at home for the first time since 1988 that Vandy has won 4 straight home games. The last time Vandy started a season 4-0 at home was back in 1982 when Vandy won all 6 home games under head coach Watson Brown. So we'll get Coach Brown's perspective on the Doors this season. Against Ball State, Eli Stowers at tight end had 8 catches for 130 yards. On the defensive side, Nick Rinaldi led Vandy's defense with 7 tackles and a sack, continuing his success. Brock Taylor stays perfect. He was 3 for 3 on field goal attempts to bring his season total to 14, tied for the 6th most field goals in a season in program history, 11 of 14 rather. So he's 11 of 14 on the season. He's 7 for 7 in his last 3 games. So Brock Taylor's hot. I'm got a feeling he'll be needed on Saturday for the Commodores in a big way. Talked about at the top Texas tight end Gunnar Helm. He hasn't just destroyed teams, but he's been a really tough cover this season, and Vandy's defense has struggled to defend the tight end position throughout this season, as we've seen, whether it was Georgia State, whether it was Virginia Tech, or even Alabama as well. Clark Lee understands the challenge, but realizes you can't focus too much on the tight end because Texas will burn you with their other receivers as well. Take a listen.
Well, you got to pick and choose, right? Because, it's a little bit easier when maybe that's the guy that's featured or that's the guy that they run the offense through, but there's, 3 other guys on the field with them that are also very capable, and you can't spread yourself thin and allow for the ball to go up to one of their fast receivers while you're trying to take the tight end away. So obviously we're aware of them, and I think when you play man, you got to understand where your help is and understand what your leverage is, and when your leverage in zones, obviously we need to have great depth in our drops and vision and break off the quarterback's shoulder, but it's really more about us executing what we do and nothing that is specifically designed to eliminate him as a threat, because the minute you start to design around him, you're going to leave one-on-ones with some really explosive players that I think can put you at a disadvantage really quickly.
That was head coach Clark Lee breaking down how they're planning on defending Gunnar Helm. He's an important part of this offense. He's not utilized as much as maybe Tanner Koziel was and is for Ball State, but he's a focal point at times. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch on Saturday. Well, the weather should be perfect. 71 degrees is the high during the day. You got a few showers in the morning when you wake up on Saturday morning with College Game Day on the TV, but it'll clear out, obviously, with winds north to northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, so wind shouldn't really be a factor. It will cool down to get down into the 40s, upper 40s, so bring your quarter zip, I would guess, and probably wear pants because, like I said, it will cool down. Clear skies. The low is around 45 degrees, so settle in for a beautiful night of football on the West End for the Commodores and the Longhorns. Let's get to the latest injury report. Start with Texas. Derrick Williams Jr., the defensive back, is out for the season. Suffered a big injury in their game against Oklahoma, so that's a big loss for the Longhorns. They also have a couple of players doubtful, and they are both 2 studs for them. Safety Andrew Makuba, number 7, is doubtful, and Isaiah Bond, receiver for the Longhorns, they're one of the best receivers in the country, he is doubtful as well. So Commodores catching a break. Again, doubtful doesn't mean they're out, but obviously doubtful to play. So that's big. Makuba and Bond, keep an eye on them in warm-ups to see if they can go for the Longhorns. Meanwhile, for the Commodores, they had a laundry list of questionable guys opening up for their first availability report on Wednesday night. But when Thursday night came, all of those guys were upgraded to probable. And there was a late addition with Colby Taylor. Clark said he's dealing with a back issue that flared up for him. So, again, another guy to keep an eye on there in warmups. But Eli Stowers, Langston Patterson, A.J. Newberry, Martell Height, Cedric Alexander, Miles Capers, and Linus Zunk were all listed as questionable on Wednesday night. They're all now probable, which is great news for the Commodores. Zaylen Woods still listed as out for Vandy. So we'll see if Zaylen Wood comes back at all this season. But obviously big to have Langston Patterson back after missing the last couple of games. And obviously good to see Eli Stowers' injury isn't serious. And we'll, like I said, continue to track Colby Taylor there at the cornerback position. All right, back over to the Longhorns. This season, 6-1. Obviously started with 6 straight wins and just rolled through teams. They beat Colorado State 52-0. They went up to the Big House in Michigan and beat them 31-12. Topped UTSA 56-7. UL Monroe 51-3. Mississippi State 35-13, and then Oklahoma 34-3. So they haven't had a ton of resistance until last week. The Georgia Bulldogs knocked them off in Austin 30-15. And you look back at that game, Texas battled back in the second half, but it wasn't quite enough. So it'll be interesting to see how Texas comes back after a battle-tested physical game against the Georgia Bulldogs last weekend. All right, more detailed information on the Longhorns here. They're averaging 39 points per game on offense. That's third in the SEC. 462 total yards per game. That's third in the SEC. 296 through the air. That's fourth in the SEC. 166 rushing yards per game. Not top 3 or 4 in the league, but still top half of the league. So this Longhorn offense is a great offense. I mean, they have struggled the last couple of weeks, specifically Quinn Ewers. He hasn't been as sharp, but he's still thrown for over 1,000 yards on the season, 68% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. As I mentioned, he's struggled the last couple of weeks. He left the Week 3 win against UTSA with an abdominal strain, and that gave way for Arch Manning, who ended up playing in a couple of those games. He started against Mississippi State and ULM with Ewers out. He's played in 5 games this season, played against Georgia when Quinn Ewers was benched there with them down 20-0. He's a deep ball thrower. Clark said they don't have to necessarily separate the two quarterbacks. Arch is a guy that will beat you deep more so than Quinn Ewers, but the challenge is defending the system, defending the offense. The offense is the offense, and they're similar type players. But Arch Manning this season, 920 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So it'll be interesting to see, do we see Arch Manning on Saturday? And what does that mean? Does that mean Ewers played bad? Does it mean he got hurt? Be really interested to see Ewers, Manning, that battle, potentially if we see both on Saturday. Longhorns are led in the backfield by a 3-headed monster. Quintravion Wisner, Jaden Blue, and Jarrett Gibson have combined for 825 yards and 9 touchdowns on the season. Jaden Blue is really good out of the backfield. He's got 3 receiving touchdowns on the season. Speaking of receiving, talked about Isaiah Bond. He's their leading receiver, 380 yards and 4 touchdowns, but he's doubtful. So that's huge for the Commodores. I talked about Gunnar Helm at the top there, 373 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ryan Wingo is another speed demon type of guy to watch that you just got to watch out for. DeAndre Moore is another guy that the Longhorns like to go to. They spread it around. They use shifts and motions to get leverage and isolate their guys in one-on-one matchups. That's what Clarkley doesn't want to happen. You can't leave guys on islands, so that's a challenge for the Commodore defense, defending Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns. For the Longhorns defense, though, this is one of the best defenses in the country, maybe the best defense statistically in the country, definitely in the SEC. They're giving up just 237 yards per game. That leads the SEC. Just 10 points per game. That leads the SEC, of course. They're led by Anthony Hill at linebacker. Leads the team with 50 tackles. Also a team leader with 5.5 sacks. So he's a guy to watch there coming off the edge. And defensive back Jahdae Barron leads the team with 3 interceptions, with Andrew Makuba, the safety, out, and Derek Williams Jr. Jahdae Barron will be leaned on heavily on Saturday for the Longhorns. All right, let's get into our interview portion. Again, we've got an interview coming up with Gunnar Hansen, Vanderbilt offensive lineman. Then we'll roll into the interview with Joey Dwyer. And then Coach Watson Brown will preview this matchup with Texas. And then Joe Cook from InsideTexas.com will get the perspective on the Longhorns. And now let's kick it all off with my interview with Gunnar Hansen. Gunnar, coming out of the Ball State game, after you've taken a look at the film with the offensive line, how did you evaluate your performance, but also the performance of the entire unit?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we played down to our competition, and just my performance as myself, it was a mid-performance. So this week we had to come on a strong note and punch them out first. Yeah,
what's the key against a Texas defensive line that has shown they've held holding teams to 10 points, not a ton of yardage given up on them? What's the impetus this week, especially when you go up against a defensive line like that?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with a physical run game. I mean, we played Bama. Bama was the same way. They're physical up front, so we just got to knock them off the ball game, and that creates shots back in the back. So just physical up front and dominate the run game.
Yeah, can you take some things from the Bama game? That first drive, you guys were able to dominate them and finish with a strong run from Cedric Alexander. Can you take things away from that Alabama game? Obviously, you take things away from every game, but coming into this game, particularly against a little bit more of a physical defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, we just got to start fast again. Once you start fast, it just builds momentum and sets the tone for the whole day. So our best thing is just starting fast for this Texas game. They're, with really physical up front. So, yeah, we just got to start fast.
Yeah, why is starting fast so important for you guys? Obviously defensively, you get the ball back with a lead, that's big, but offensively for you guys, why is that so important?
Yeah, because it just sets the tone for the whole team. I mean, we go out there and score first. Defense looks like they got to get their shit together. So just going out there, our Coach K preaches start fast. Coach Lee preaches start fast. Everybody, so we just got to go out there from the jump.
Yeah, what have you learned from Coach K so far? Obviously, it's a lot different from what you guys did last year, but what has he brought to this offensive line group?
Yeah, Coach K, I mean, he's a great guy. He's amazing. He really changed me. He just back to the basics and back to like old school. So Coach K he just really preaches on being physical up front, which I keep saying, but that's the biggest key of what we got to do this weekend. So just learning from him and everything he teaches.
After the Kentucky game, you called Diego Pavia the Heisman Trophy winner. What's it like playing with him? He's brought so much to this team, but what has he instilled in you and also this offensive line group? Because your guys' job is pretty important to keep him intact.
Yeah, just he brings the underdog mindset. Like, we go in every game as an underdog, so we just gotta. So blocking for him is cool because he's really experienced back there, and just knowing you have someone back there that you trust and believe is a great feeling.
Yeah, you mentioned the underdog. You guys were underdogs against Alabama, Kentucky, Virginia Tech as well. Is that part of the motivation? Like, do you guys talk about that, or is that something that you guys don't really put much stock into?
Yeah, not really. We don't really care about outside factors, just everything in here. But shit, I kind of like being an underdog. You go out there and shock the world every week, so yeah.
How you feeling? How's this week of practice been? Not just you, but the team. What's the feel around this group heading into obviously the biggest game of the season?
Yeah, I feel like the whole team's laser focused. We're ready to go, and can't wait for Saturday.
You got a new haircut?
Yeah. I had to chop it off. My hair got too long.
I like it. Gunnar, good luck this Saturday, and thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Great stuff there from Vanderbilt offensive lineman Gunnar Hansen, fresh off a new haircut, so he'll be feeling good, hopefully playing good on Saturday against the Longhorns. A great defensive line, great defense overall, so his job will be huge on Saturday on the West End. Before we move on to an interview with Joey Dwyer, let's get to a few sponsors. Our guest line is presented by John Levin, good friend of the show, Wobble Bond Dickinson, his company. Thanks to the student-athletes at Vanderbilt University for their dedication, effort, and hard work. Our guest line is also presented by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-line packaging automation, and Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200, to see what your rights are and if they can help. And now let's kick it on over to our interview with Joey Dwyer. Kicking off this week's pregame show like we usually do with Joey Dwyer from VandySports.com to preview Vandy and Texas coming up Saturday, 3:15 p.m. Central Time kickoff on the SEC Network. Joey, how you feeling about this matchup right now? I know we've gone into these games, maybe not as confident as the players, as the people within the building. But I think we've learned, or at least I've learned, not to doubt this team, not to obviously doubt Diego Pavia. And this team has shown their mettle. They've shown their worth. This feels a little different, obviously, than even Alabama. I think heading into Alabama, they were the number one team of the country. They were coming off a win over Georgia. That seemed insurmountable. Now, I don't think either of us thought Vanderbilt was going to get blown out against Alabama, but neither of us thought the goalpost would be in the Cumberland River later that night either, and that happened. So what's your feel? Like, as we get into the later part of this week, what's your feel on this matchup?
Well, I think they're going to need to play dang near a perfect game to be able to come out with a win on Saturday. But I also think that they're capable of doing that because they've done it before. They did it against Alabama. And you're never betting on a team to play a perfect game. But I'm also not betting against them in terms of doing that as well because they've done it before. And I just think they have a lot of belief going into the week. Maybe not quite as much as Alabama. We haven't had anybody guarantee a win to us at this point. Maybe Gunnar Hansen will do that for you today. I don't know. But it just feels like they think they've got a shot. And when there's a team that is a 20-point underdog and thinks they have a chance, you normally write them off. But I'm not writing this team off, Billy. I think they're capable of going and shocking the world. But, I mean, Texas is a lot more talented than they are. The speed is something that's really concerning, probably more speed than Alabama has. So that's something to watch. But, man, I'm not counting this team out against anybody right now. And if there was one team to count them out against, it would be Texas. But, Billy, I don't really have a reason to count them out based off what they've done so far. They're on a 3-game win streak, and that has included beating a team that was ranked higher than Texas is. So we'll see, but not quite betting against them right now.
I don't want to make this too much about Texas, but I think a lot of this game will revolve around which Texas shows up. Does Texas come with their C game? And if Vandy comes with their A game, Longhorns are going down. But I'm interested to learn, Joey, because Texas is a top 3-4 team in the country by ranking standards. Now, who knows? Maybe Vanderbilt knocks them off and Texas drops a couple more games this year. That's how wild this season has been. But so far, Texas has proven they, even in the Georgia game, they came back there and made it close. So I think that second half against Georgia might have proven, how good they are. But if Vanderbilt has their A game and Texas has their A game, can Vanderbilt win? Because we've heard from Diego Pavias that only Vanderbilt football can beat Vanderbilt football. Mm-hmm. Well, that means if you play your A game, you don't lose. Now, tight game, late, who knows? You never know what happens. Maybe it's something crazy that happens late in the game. But I wonder that, Joey, if both teams have their A-plus game, can Vanderbilt win?
Yeah. I mean, the margin is really small this weekend, Billy. They have to be really sound, especially defensively in terms of their tackling. Like I wrote yesterday, Texas, if Vandy makes one mistake, it's going to be 6. And that's kind of the theme of the weekend defensively for me. I just think if Vandy doesn't show up and play dang near a perfect game defensively, Texas is going to score 40 points, and that's just how it's going to be. And that maybe makes me think that the margin is even smaller than it was against Alabama, because I think the margin was pretty small and they were still able to do it. But it's a pretty comparable margin. They can't turn it over. One turnover is almost a recipe for disaster in a game like this if the A team Texas shows up. If they can't run the ball for a series or two, that's a recipe for disaster against the A game Texas. So Vanderbilt's A game is going to have to be comparable or maybe even better than it was against Alabama a few weeks back. I would expect this to be maybe even a heavier Texas crowd than the Alabama crowd a few weeks back. I mean, what is the stat? Like half the Vandy season ticket holders have a Texas area code this year or something. So it's going to be different, Billy, but I think they have a path to winning, but that path is as difficult or perhaps more difficult as it was against Alabama, even if they play their A game. The margin for error, and I know we've heard Clarkley say that for years, and it probably brings back some PTSD for people, but I think you're seeing that concept now. Margin for error is really small this weekend, but there is a path if they do all the right things, all the right little things as well.
Let's get into Texas a little bit deeper. How do you compare them to Alabama? Luke, Chris, and I talked about that, and it's a really interesting discussion because, again, heading into Alabama, a lot of the talk was that Alabama's the best team in the country right now, but you really got to get into a team's season, the last third of a season to really realize how good they are, and you never know who's going to get injured. All of a sudden, we're talking about injuries. It seems like Quinn Ewers' injury has affected him a little bit these last couple of weeks. He hasn't been at his best, Joey, and I'm not sure if a lot of Vanderbilt fans realize that he hasn't been himself. Now, they still have a great offensive line. They've been able to run the ball pretty well, and they've got Isaiah Bond on the outside, a great tight end, and Gunnar Helm. But how do you look at Texas compared to Alabama? I know you're not sitting here watching every Texas game, but I know you watched that Georgia game a little bit on Saturday. I'm very intrigued to see how does Texas look on the field on Saturday compared to what this Alabama team brought in. And is the game plan essentially the same now that even though you're facing Texas, they've got the same amount of skill as Alabama? I'm interested to see.
Yeah, I don't quite know exactly how comparable they are. I do think it's interesting Texas is coming in off of a loss versus Alabama coming in off of a win, where maybe Alabama had some room to look over Vanderbilt, and now Texas doesn't, with Vanderbilt being a ranked team and Texas obviously kind of fighting for their season. I wonder if Texas gets in with 2 and if they can get to the SEC championship with 2. So this is a game with real playoff implications, and that's the type of team you're dealing with here, right? I mean, there's 2 quarterbacks on Texas's roster that are probably playing the NFL sooner rather than later. Isaiah Bond will probably be an NFL player. I mean, there's so many guys on this roster that are capable of being NFL guys, and I just think, again, the margin for error is really small, especially because Texas is not going to come in and overlook Vanderbilt. I think they're really well coached. I think, especially offensively, they create a lot of mismatches in space. And Clark has talked about how they want to avoid one-on-ones. And Texas, I think, has greater speed than just about anybody Vanderbilt has faced in terms of what it has offensively. So that's going to be a huge challenge for Vanderbilt. Just can they get 3 or 4 guys running to the ball consistently? Can they avoid having a guy like Marcel Height, who's questionable, by the way, in a one-on-one on the perimeter against Isaiah Bond, and you're having to make that tackle? And if he doesn't make the tackle, what happens there, right? So I think there's a lot in terms of like scheming and matchups that Vanderbilt's going to have to do to even be competitive in this game, because I don't think if guys are consistently one-on-ones, they have any chance in this game. And that's just the kind of team Texas is. And I think that's the kind of team Alabama is too. But Vanderbilt was able to play keep away long enough to kind of negate that. They're going to have to do that again. And they're also going to have to be really sound defensively, especially in the short passing game.
Joey, let's get into the offense and what they've got to do in order to defeat Texas. Against Alabama, Pavia was 16 of 20 for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just about as efficient as you can be. He also had 56 rushing yards on 20 carries. So he had the ball in his hands a lot, as is typically the case with this offense. You want the ball in the hands of Pavia. I think he's got to be even more efficient. I think he's got to probably throw for 40, 50 more yards. And I think he's got to rush for 20, 30 more yards. I think he's got this Texas defense is not the Alabama defense. The Alabama defense is susceptible. They've given up chunk yardage to just about everybody they've played. South Carolina, Tennessee, like that Alabama defense is. I'm not saying they're awful, but that's not a top half defense in the league. I don't even think. Texas, on the other hand, they're the best defense in the SEC statistically. They've given up just 237 yards per game, 10 points per game. So this is going to be a challenge for the offense. I'm wondering, Joey, how do they attack anytime Texas brings pressure? I wonder how often Texas will bring pressure. But also, I'm sure they'll be able to get pressure with 3 or 4 at the same time. How does Vanderbilt stand the test of time in this game? In the third and the fourth quarter, can you still protect Pavia? Can you keep him upright? Can he stay healthy? Can he avoid those big hits early in the game? That's what I'm looking for. But again, I think the big thing here, Joey, is that you're going to need another Herculean effort, and maybe even better than a Herculean effort from Pavia to win this game. Although, you never know. Maybe you force a couple 3 turnovers from Texas, and Pavia maybe doesn't have to play the game of his life. But I'm leaning toward he's got to have another game of his life type deal.
I'm certainly leaning that way as well, Billy. I think Texas just makes it so difficult on you, and I think for Vanderbilt, it's more about making the timely play than consistently like blowing Texas doors off offensively. I think they've got to convert on 3rd down. I think if it's a 2nd and 8, they've got to get 2nd and 4. Things along those lines are going to win Vandy this game. I think it has to be a really good performance, but from what we've seen so far, I don't think it has to be an outlier performance. And I think that's a really good spot to be in if you're Vanderbilt. I do think their offense has really struggled the last 2 weeks against Kentucky and Ball State, at least relative to what we have expected from this group. And I think that's a big thing to watch, is just, can they deliver anywhere near the Alabama performance? Because the last 2 weeks, they certainly haven't. Something tells me they're going to be more ready to go this week, but will that be enough? I'm not sure. Eli Stowers being questionable is something that I'm watching as well. I think the Vanderbilt offense is capable of turning in a performance that gets you a chance to win this game, but it's going to be the true definition of complimentary football if they're going to win this game. And I just don't know if they can do that a little bit better than Texas. I think something to watch, too, is Diego Pavia's health. He's not on the injury report, but I think it is worth noting last week, early in the game, it felt like they were kind of hesitant to use his legs, and that was just a huge hindrance to their offense. And then in the second half, kind of let him loose a little bit, let him off the leash, and their offense started to look a little more dynamic like it had earlier in the year. So his health, I think, is a huge piece of this, and how they can use his legs, I think, is a huge piece of this as well, because I think if you can't use his legs, then you are maybe not quite the Vanderbilt of last season, but your offense looks a lot more similar to that than you would kind of hope it does. So they have to be multidimensional, more so than they were in the first half against Ball State, and they've just got to make the timely play. They got to convert on 3rd down. They can't turn it over, and when they're behind the sticks kind of earlier in the downs, they've got to get it closer, and that's just kind of what I look at this week. Tim Beck's going to have to call one of the games of his life this week, and if he does it, they're going to have a chance. If he doesn't, and if his guys don't execute, if they have drop problems like they did against Ball State, they could be in real trouble.
Against Alabama, Vandy was 12 of 18 on third down. And throughout the season, Vandy's 8th in the country and leads the SEC in third down conversion percentage at 52%. So you got to convert on third downs. They're also tied for first among Power 4 programs with 1 interception thrown this season. You're going to have to take care of the football. I don't think you can have any turnovers against Texas because you've got under 10 possessions, most likely again, is the hope here for Clark Lee. We'll have a chance to talk to him today. And Vandy has the best red zone offense in the SEC, 97%. That's 6th in the country, Joey. So this offense, if they can hold to those stats, Vanderbilt's got a shot. But again, the margin for error is extremely small, and we will see what happens. Vanderbilt-Texas, 3:15 on Saturday. Joey, I'll see you there. And here's to maybe another fun Saturday on West End.
Billy, if they win, I think we're going to have to send you to Broadway to chase the goalpost down.
I got you. Are we sure they're going to let it out of the stadium again? That's my question.
Can they afford another goalpost?
I don't know. We'll have to see.
I think they probably can.
We need some investigative reporting on that, Joey.
Yeah, I'll get into that.
Get to the bottom of it. All right, that's Joey Dwyer from right here at VandySports.com. We will have plenty more coverage with Joey and myself, last-minute thoughts, rapid reaction after the game, and much more. So stay tuned for that. But, Joey, I'll see you Saturday.
See you Saturday.
Rolling along with this week's pregame show with former Vanderbilt quarterback and offensive coordinator, head coach. He's done it all there on the West End, and he joins me now to break down this Vanderbilt offense led by Diego Pavia under center, and also offensive coordinator Tim Beck and Jerry Killer, what they've been able to do this season. Coach, let's start with overall. Obviously it started against Virginia Tech, and we all sat here and watched that game and went, "Wow, can they keep this rolling?" Surely, when you get into the SEC, this can't continue. But it did. You knock off Alabama. They go to Missouri and almost beat Missouri. And then you follow that up with a win in Lexington over Kentucky. It's probably the toughest game so far for them this season. What have you seen just offensively and just why this offense has been so tough to defend?
Billy, I've always thought when I played at Vanderbilt before my full year and sophomore year and getting hurt into my third game of my junior year and never played again, we ran an option style offense and threw the ball. And I never forgot that, and very successful in 69 doing that. And then when I became the offensive coordinator there, we did the same thing. We ran option football. We were all under the center. The gun hadn't appeared yet. We were all under the center running triple option football under the center and throwing the ball. And now today, that's exactly what Clark has done. And I think he's not getting enough credit for it because this is the style he wanted. He had to come up with more NIL money. There's no doubt about that, and was able to get that process started in a good way. To bring in some better players. Then he had to decide what he wanted to do on offense because he was going to fix the defense himself. And I've seen him do that. I think they're much, much improved this year defensively. But he decided on an option-style offense and throw the ball. And he went and got a coach that knows it up and down. And he got a quarterback that he watched beat Auburn on tape and that could run and throw. And he brought in the head coach, who I think has brought an unbelievable toughness mentality to the team. So I think it's all worked. And the reason it has is you didn't put all three of these together. They've been together for 3 years. So the two coaches and Pavia knew this stuff backwards and forwards before they ever put a black and gold outfit on. And I think that's the difference that people don't understand is nothing they're seeing is new to them. They've been through this offense. They've seen all the different looks, and they kind of know together what we need to do next. And it's worked, and it's fit Vanderbilt to a T. I mean, they're right up, Billy, they're right up at the top in time of possession. They're right up in the top in third down conversions, and they're right up in top in fewest number of turnovers. So, I mean, that's the way you win games. First, you don't beat yourself, and second, you make the other team beat you. And that's why I think the style they're running will work against anybody. They play really well on that given day. They're going to have a chance to win. They shorten games. They don't make mistakes. And they're underdogs most of the time. And so therefore, then who's the heat on in the fourth quarter and third and fourth quarters? It's on the team that's supposed to win. So there's no doubt in my mind. If they go play really well against Texas, they'll make Texas beat them, and we'll see if that can happen.
Yeah, obviously they did it against Alabama. That was a high-scoring game, 40-35. And going into the Alabama game, Coach, my thought was, well, Alabama's bigger up front, and Vanderbilt hasn't seen a front seven like the Crimson Tide. Well, first possession, they go, 80, 90 yards down the field and score 7-0.
Yeah.
Then they get a big interception, pick six there that just ignited the place, and Vanderbilt had all the momentum. But I mean, it's almost this offense. It's like nothing can really stop it, because if you do load the box, well, they'll slip a receiver down the field on a 4th and 1 when you never thought that was coming. So, heading into this Texas game, do you think their front seven can overwhelm Vandy? But even if they do try to, Vanderbilt's got answers, though, right?
Well, they'll have answers on the board. They're going to have to execute their stuff. They're going to have to make the plays. That's the key to this. Is you're usually, if you know what you're doing, you don't put yourself in bad situations. And I've watched Vanderbilt all year, and one thing they're doing, they're calling the game nearly to a 4-down offense, especially when they cross the 50-yard line. And they're not afraid at all on 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8 to run the little shuttle pass that Lucy Jones used to call the rabbit shuffle. That was my nickname through college. And now here it is making an appearance again. And they're not afraid to run the ball on 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8, because I think they're going to go for it on 4th down. So, and I'm not sure defenses have figured that out. I watched Alabama that whole game. They're playing 3rd and 7s, and it's a passing down to them. And it was a running down to Vanderbilt, and an option offense, when you're playing the pass, that's not a good thing. Exactly what Navy and Army and Air Force are doing right now, Vanderbilt is doing the same things, except Vanderbilt never gets under the center. Army and Navy do, but they also get in the gun. And they're both undefeated. And it's an offense that went away for a while, and now it's making a reappearance. And one of the great reasons Vanderbilt's had success with it, I think, Billy, is people are only seeing it in 1 week. Nobody else is running it. So when Alabama came here, they hadn't seen anything like that, and it caught them off guard. I didn't think Alabama honestly had a clue on how to stop it. I think they could have played for another 4 hours, and the score would have gotten worse instead of better. They had no clue how to stop it. And it's going to be interesting to see how Texas tries to play this stuff. But the good thing about it is if you stay within the chains, it's really hard to stop. Now, if you get yourself 2nd and 15 and all of that, now that makes it much harder. But once you can hang within the chains, that's exactly what we did with Taylor, Norman, Jordan, and all those guys. We were a chain offense, man. We'd 4 and 5 yard you to death, and keep the ball. And our defense was really good at getting turnovers. And it reminds me so much of what I'm seeing this year out of this Vanderbilt team. A solid defense that'll make a play here and there to stop a drive, and an offense that's just right so far has just in the big games has executed really, really well. And part of the Georgia State game was because they got behind the chains that night. And they just can't do that against these good teams. That's what they've got to do in the Texas game. Stay within those chains where it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6 at the worst. And then you're still in a run-pass mode at that point.
I told some people so far this week that Diego Pavia is going to have the same type of performance against Alabama and make even more plays, make 2 or 3 more big plays like that 4th and 1. That just – I mean, I can't remember a play like that. That's got to be one of the bigger plays in Vanderbilt football history, considering the stage and how big of a play it was and how much they needed it. But what is it? I mean, there's probably some others, Coach, but my gosh, the Stones to call it and then to execute it.
Well, and Billy, I don't think I may be wrong, but as a coach watching the play, that wasn't the primary target. They were running what we used to call a belly pass. They're running a guy to the flat and running a tight end kind of to the corner. And he fakes the ball. They're both covered.
Yep.
They're not open. And he wheels around and just lays it up to a deep post and gets clobbered on the play. I mean, they knocked the snot out of him. But he laid it up. The receiver had kind of stopped. And he sees the ball and then takes off. It catches the Alabama kid off guard, and he catches it in stride for a touchdown. You can't make many more plays than he made against Alabama now. I mean, the kid just made them time and time again. He's going to have to keep doing that down the stretch for Vanderbilt to get to their goals here. He is the catalyst. If you run this style of offense, the quarterback's always the catalyst. Always. And he's the one that's got to run the machine, execute it, and then make plays with his arm and his legs. And Pavia's been able to do that. His confidence and his toughness are just out of sight. They're just out of sight. And I think that's got a lot to do with being an older player and been in this offense for 3 years and just his chemical makeup. He's just one of those kind of kids that loves the big play at the big time and seems to get better as the toughness appears during games.
How does that infiltrate a team? Obviously, it starts, when he got in, I would guess midway through the summer. But, he's affected, obviously, the entire offense. The offensive line has blocked better. They look like a totally different team defensively. They want to get the ball back to him as much as possible. The kickers don't want to screw it up. Like, what kind of an impact does that have on a team when you've got a quarterback that every time he's got the ball, he gives you a chance, and you're never out of a game?
Well, only one person can do that. That can affect a team like that, and that is the quarterback. There is not another position on the field that can have that major effect on a whole football team. But a quarterback that has all of those pieces that he's got with his toughness, his competitiveness, his confidence, he doesn't care who he plays. Honestly, I would bet you, if you ask him behind closed doors, he'd much rather play Alabama and Texas every day of the week as Ball State and Georgia State. He just likes those big games. And that position, and you've got a guy like that, like we had in 82 with Whit Taylor. When you have that, man, and everybody then turns to him when the heat's on, and he keeps making the play. So what does that do? Just adds to the confidence. It adds to the confidence of the whole team. And I can see it. I can see it from a distance. They're walking out on the field against Texas, and they absolutely think they got a great shot to win the game. That wouldn't have happened 3 months ago. And but again, him coming in late summer like that, the first thing that had to happen is he knew this stuff backwards and forwards, so he didn't have to learn everything. So he walked in the door and kind of patted his chest and said, "Let's go." Yep. Because he wasn't sitting there having to learn. Whereas a lot of these transfers coming in, Billy, at all these universities, I'm hearing of people with 57 new faces. It takes a while to put it together. But it doesn't when your quarterback, your offensive coordinator, and your head coach come all in together.
That'll help. Coach, last thing, this game, if you're Clark Lee, what's your game plan? We saw against Georgia, Quinn Ewers was frustrated. I mean, they didn't have any time to throw, and when he did, he wasn't making the right reads and was a little inaccurate, had to put Arch Manning in, and obviously, poor kid, he got blown up too, had a forced fumble. Don't think Vanderbilt can bring the type of pressure Georgia can. I could be wrong. So defensively, how do you approach an offense like Texas and Sark that they've got all kinds of motion? They like to isolate their speed guys. For Clark defensively, how do you approach that on Saturday?
Just like he has all year to me. That's been the difference. They've been so different defensively, and he's playing to his offense. He knows the game's going to be shorter. And what I think he's done, he's been very patient. And he'll let them move the ball, not let them, but being patient. They're going to gain some yards and pick and choose your time to try to get them behind the chains And once you get them behind the chains, don't be afraid to come after them. And that's what I think he's done all year. I bet you it won't be one bit different against Texas on Saturday. He'll be very patient. Give up a play here, give up a play there. Keep your cool and find a way to put them in a bad situation before they get that drive all the way down the field. And then when you get them behind the chains, get the ball back. And that's what they've been able to do so far, because they give up quite a bit of yards, but they're not giving up a ton of points, and they're hanging in there, and they're not giving up enough points that their offense can't score that many, and that's what it's all about.
It's going to be fun. Vanderbilt in Texas, 3:15 on Saturday. That's Coach Watson Brown. Coach, enjoy it. I know you'll be watching, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Go Doors. They got a shot.
Wrapping up this week's pregame show with a visit from Joe Cook. Covers the Longhorns from InsideTexas.com. Does a really good job over there at On3 Sports. Joe, let's start with last week's game. Did you have much fun covering that one in Austin? Not a whole lot going on in that one, huh?
Yeah, it was a lot was going on that weekend, and the experience there, a record crowd for DKR, and fitting in two more than they did in 2022 when Bama was there. Really raucous crowd. The defense for the Longhorns lived up to what was needed, but the offense could not stay the same. A lot of that had to do with Quinn Ewers, but it definitely is not 100% on him. He's just kind of the lightning rod for it. And though they tried to make that comeback in the second half, they just weren't able to do it. Steve Sarkisian spoke Wednesday about how they like to be balanced. They like to do a little bit of everything. When you're down 23-0, you can't do a little bit of everything. You got to get back in the game and get back quickly. And the Texas offense, though a little bit improved, just wasn't up for it during the second half. So that was the game that everybody had circled on the calendar before the season started. And now that, I think there may have been, I'm sure you've heard this before, I think you know what I mean by it, a lot of teams probably thought they would have had a brief respite in going to Nashville and playing Vanderbilt. But now instead, it's a third straight ranked opponent that Texas is going to play. It's another challenging trip, and it's a team that really knows how to grind down possessions and, limit the opportunities for Texas to get its offense going in the right direction again.
You mentioned the quarterback switch there from Ewers to Manning there late in the first half. Ended up going back to Ewers, and the offense started clicking a little bit there. It was just a little too late maybe there for the Longhorns. But what was the impetus of that switch? And obviously we had the old 24/7 sports hack, and obviously I didn't believe that, right? Even when it was released. I did see he didn't show up to his media appearance. I don't even know if that was true or not either. But what do you take away from that switch? I mean, I know there's a lot of probably overrated opinions on it, overhyped opinions. But what did you take away from that? Even with Ewers going back in, is there anything maybe Vanderbilt fans should know heading into to this matchup coming out of that?
Yeah, that turned Monday crazy. I didn't make anything of him not coming to his media availability. It's typical that he does, but I didn't think anything of it. The hack created a very, very entertaining 20 minutes in my life, but glad that 247 got it all sorted out. I think that you can look at this as a one-game thing. And I know it's really difficult and it may be impossible. But if Arch Manning's name was John Smith, I think a lot of people would be understanding, like, you know what? Yeah, they did need a spark. They did need something, even though he is that talented. Because his name's Arch Manning, that may be impossible. But I do think it was just a one-game thing. That said, it's a one-game thing till it's not. I don't think something like that's going to happen again on Saturday. I kind of hope not, just for sanity's sake. I do think that Quinn Ewers is still feeling some of the after effects of his injury that knocked him out of a couple games. He's never been a great downfield thrower, but he's even doing worse. And then that's affecting how he does in the mid-range. Usually 10 to 20 yards, that's where he throws some of his best footballs, and it hasn't been working out that way. So we'll see if he's a little bit more healed. I know everybody's dinged up at this point in the season. Also, if you're out there, you're expected to execute. But I think Quinn Ewers, with how much effort and energy and time that Steve Sarkisian has invested into him, and how much Steve Sarkisian has talked about Quinn Ewers being the quarterback that can take Texas to, great heights, whether it be in Atlanta in December or Atlanta in January. I don't think he's going to go ahead and pull the plug on all that unless it is just, unrepairably bad yet again. And I don't see that happening.
After a loss like that to Georgia, there's some fans around the country all of a sudden quickly saying, well, how good is Texas? It was Texas all they were cracked up to be. I'm not one of those. I do still think Texas is one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country. Clark Lee actually said that on Tuesday. He believes that as well. Which would mean they're one of those top 3 or 4 teams in the country. But has your opinion on this team changed much since that loss to Georgia? Because before the Georgia game, the best win there was at Michigan. And at the time, a lot of the talk was, man, what a statement win for Texas. All of a sudden, Michigan doesn't seem to be what they're all cracked up to be. So what has changed, if any, on your how you feel about this Texas team?
My thoughts on the defense were confirmed. I really thought this was a great defense. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's like, oh, you're going against Alex Orji. Oh, you're going against Michael Hawkins. Like, the best quarterback on your schedule may be General Booty. Carson Beck did not really do all that much. Threw 3 interceptions. Wasn't, aided by some of his receivers. Had some good throws. But, the Texas defense made life tough on Carson Beck. The thing that really destroyed Texas was the short fields. Texas is, they're going to give up yards. Every defense does give up yards. But when you only have to give up 20 or 10 for them to be in scoring range, and with Georgia, the run game anywhere being within scoring range, it makes a huge difference. So I really felt that my thoughts on the Texas defense were confirmed. As far as the offense goes, I think we learned a lot about the wide receivers, maybe more about how good Georgia is, but we learned that the wide receivers, they still have some growth ahead of them. I think despite the sacks, a lot of what the offensive line did in the pass protection game was really quality. I think we finally had it really confirmed that and this was one of my big concerns heading into the Oklahoma game, was that can Texas have to have it yards against a stout defensive front? They did it against Michigan. They did it against Oklahoma, and they couldn't do it against Georgia. And of course, a lot of that had to do with the shape of the game. So do I still think Texas is a really high quality team? Yeah, I do SEC power rankings, just kind of off the top of the dome every Monday. And I had Texas tied at number 2 behind Georgia. I think Texas and Tennessee were tied, and then I had A&M and LSU, and that's despite the records. Do they, when they're facing elite teams like Georgia, are some of those flaws going to be magnified? Yeah, and especially so when those flaws result in 17 opponent points off 3 or 4 turnovers. So they're still a high quality team. I think they're top 10. I think they're a playoff contender, but they definitely have some not flaws, but maybe some weaknesses as it pertains to the ground game. And of course, they got to get Quinn Ewers sorted out. He's got to play better. They need him to play better and get the passing game going how Sarkisian wants it to go.
All right, let's get into this matchup. I know a lot of Vanderbilt fans wanted College Game Day. They wanted to be ranked. They are ranked. The top 25 is all of a sudden the top 25 matchup. I think at the beginning of the season, Vanderbilt fans did not look forward to this matchup and maybe weren't as excited as they are now. But you knock off Alabama, you start to get some feeling maybe Vanderbilt can do it again. We'll see, obviously, what happens. But where's the path for Vanderbilt? Like where in Texas's DNA could Vanderbilt slip through the cracks and potentially scare the Longhorns, you think?
I think they can probably control possession pretty darn well. I will say that Texas last year, back when he was like a functional quarterback, because he doesn't seem like this year, they played Jalen Daniels and they played Kansas. He was still a little dinged up then, but they ran a very kind of similar offense, slow the game down, try to do some spread option running stuff. And Texas had none of it. a lot of that was due to Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, who I think people in Nashville may be pretty familiar with now. And though those guys aren't on the team, they still have a stout defense. They're still probably going to be able to be run on a little bit more, especially in the scheme that Tim Beck and Pavia and Ced Alexander all are able to deploy. So I think the path is, obviously forcing turnovers and keeping the Texas offense off the field. Georgia can defend guys like Isaiah Bond and Ryan Wingo and Matthew Gold and even DeAndre Moore on a regular basis. I know that, DeRicky Wright's a name I'm really familiar with. I know that there's some quality guys, elsewhere in that defensive backfield, but their strength doesn't appear to be, sticking with guys who run 4.4s. So if they can avoid, explosive plays, kind of like the Alabama game, keep the Texas offense off the field as long as possible, make 1st and 10 into 2nd and 7 and 3rd and 3 and 1st and 10 again. That's their path to victory, is keeping the opportunities for Texas to get off the field. So this is going to be a game where the Longhorn linebackers, Anthony Hill, Leona Lafau, and David Benda, they have to be really minding where they're at. They did that successfully against Michigan. That's kind of similar, at least I think, in their approaches. The Wolverines under Alex Orji and Diego Pavia, I think they do some similar stuff. They were great against Michigan. We'll see if they're able to do that. And, if they can keep those 2nd downs into 2nd and 9s and 3rd and 7s, that'll go a long way for the Longhorns.
Saw where Clemson transfer Andrew Makuba is out for this game, and I heard where another cornerback could be out as well for Texas. How do you think that affects this defense? I know you just mentioned the linebackers are going to be key. Every now and then Vanderbilt will find a way to get a receiver wide open down the field, and you go, well, how'd that happen? Well, they lull you to sleep with the running game. That's kind of what they did against Missouri a couple of times, and same thing with Alabama. But with those injuries, Makuba being the biggest one, outside of those, are there any that Vanderbilt fans should look at and take note of? And how do you think maybe that injury and some of those injuries could impact the Longhorns?
Yeah, so they're going to probably be down Makuba this game. Sounds like they want to give him a week off, go into the bye, and get him back. They're already down Derek Williams, who was at that spot for the season. So they're probably going to have to rely on Jelani McDonald, true sophomore, and then Jordan Johnson-Rebel, a true freshman at one of those safety spots, to play alongside Michael Taff. They could also move Jahdae Barron, who had 2 interceptions, including the bottle throwing one that everybody has been talking about over the course of the week. They could move him around. He's super versatile. He's the most experienced guy. They feel good about what they have at corner behind him. But the secondary, I think, proved that it's up for the task last week when they played Georgia. Of course, they got to keep an eye on Stowers. And I think it's one of those things where Diego Pavia breaks tendencies pretty darn often. And if he's able to do that, I mean, Texas can't be lulled to sleep, like you mentioned, about tendency. They got to be ready to, stay in front of Stowers or whoever it is trying to surge behind them on a down-to-down basis. So they are dinged up at safety. It's still a position where, Jelani McDonald honestly played a good amount against these running teams, against Michigan, against, when Georgia was in its heavy sets, he would come in and play. So I don't think it's too much of a big adjustment from what he's been doing. He's just going to have to do it a lot more often now that, Makuba is probably is on the shelf this week, and Derek Williams is out as well.
All right, last thing before I let you go, 2-part here. What do you think happens Saturday? And also, we saw Alabama fans come into Nashville and take over First Bank Stadium. Virginia Tech fans had a lot of fans. Do you think Longhorns fans show up just the way Alabama and Tech fans did to the Music City?
Honestly, I think so. Nashville and Austin are probably the 2 easiest cities to get to within the SEC footprint, as far as flying there and not having to rent a car. Texas fans travel well. They traveled extremely well to Michigan. I think, of a crowd that was 110,000, there may have been 10,000 there. Like, they packed the place in. There was, you could see clips from post game of a lot of Longhorn fans there when singing the alma mater. They traveled well to Alabama. A lot of this is a novel experience, seeing all the new destinations that they'll be a part of in the SEC, and you combine that with what Nashville offers, what everything that Vanderbilt and its campus offers. I bet you're going to see a good amount of burnt orange. Will they be the same number as people from Bama who just have a short drive or may already live in Nashville, or Virginia Tech, who, I can't remember where Blacksburg is close to, but Dulles to Nashville isn't that far of a flight. So I feel like Texas fans are going to travel well. There's obviously still a lot of excitement for this team with being only one loss and, still being ranked in the top 5. Will they take it over? I don't know. We'll have to see. Vanderbilt should be really excited about this game being ranked. I hope the student section's packed, and it'll be fun to see how this one plays out. But I'm looking forward to seeing how Texas fans travel.
Should be fun, especially with these two teams haven't met since, is it 1924?
Something like that. And this is one of the few teams that Texas has played more than a handful of times that has a winning record against the Longhorns. It's just that they haven't played in about almost 100 years. Yeah,
back when they had leather helmets there, and I don't even know what conferences these two teams were in, but either way, it should be fun. Should be a really juiced up environment in Nashville, and hopefully everybody has fun and safe travels, Joe. And thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely, thank you.
That'll do it. That's another pregame show, probably the best one of the year so far. Big thanks to Clark Lee for his comments. Offensive lineman Gunnar Hansen, fresh off the new haircut. Joey Dwyer with his storylines to watch. Coach Watson Brown, how about that interview? Great insight on the impact Diego Pavia has made and their chances against Texas. He likes them. So we'll see if Vanderbilt can pull off the upset. And also big thanks to Joe Cook from InsideTexas.com. Before we close it out, this podcast has always been free, and we plan for it to stay that way. So here's how you can help keep it that way. Give the podcast a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. If you're listening and haven't subscribed to VandySports.com yet, please do. It's $99 a year and $9.99 a month. That helps us tremendously. Also, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel. Stock is up on the Vandy Sports YouTube channel. All kinds of press availabilities, rapid reactions, pregame shows, all kind of different interviews up on our YouTube channel. So that's the place to be. Like this video, go comment, subscribe, do all that stuff right here on our Vandy Sports YouTube channel. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee, chrislee70@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon. We'll see you Saturday for Vanderbilt and Texas. Don't forget, keep it right here on the Vandy Sports Podcast Network with more episodes on the 440 Sports Network.